Today's show is sponsored by BMC, and BMC wants to know, is your business on its A game? The A game is when systems are intelligent by learning from markets, where automation is paramount yet effortless, and when technology and people work as one in an enterprise. The A game is your business at its absolute best. BMC calls this the autonomous digital enterprise. Find out more at bmc.com/agame. That's bmc.com/agame.
Cloudcast Media presents from the massive studios in Raleigh, North Carolina. This is the Cloudcast with Aaron Delp and Brian Gracely, bringing you the best of cloud computing from around the world.
Good morning, good evening, wherever you are, and welcome back to the Cloudcast. We are coming to you live from the massive Cloudcast studios here in Raleigh, North Carolina. Hope everybody is doing well as we continue through November 2021. The year continues to move forward. We're kind of rapidly moving through Q4 as we get close to the holiday season. Hope everybody is doing well. Let's jump right into Cloud News of the Week because there's a nice little smattering of this and that we kind of caught our eye this last week or so. First up is General Electric. GE has announced they're going to break up into three different companies. GE, at least during the 90s, was kind of looked at as the poster child for how to run a great company, how to be diversified in a lot of different markets. Obviously, they were in aviation, they were in electricity, they were in financial services, they were in all sorts of stuff. And their approach maybe did or didn't evolve as well as it should have as the market got more technology centric as opposed to some of the things they were working on. They had this interesting business. But anyways, the reason we brought it up is they announced this breakup, and GE was one of those companies that maybe 8 or 9 years ago had really announced, hey, they were going to become a software company. Right? There's this mantra that we like to throw around all the time that more and more companies, regardless of what they do, are becoming software companies. GE was really on the cutting edge of doing that. I mean, they were making investments in Pivotal Software, Pivotal Corporation, and lots of other things. It just kind of didn't pan out for them, right? Becoming a software company was maybe not necessarily their DNA. Maybe they underestimated how long it was going to take to become, quote unquote, a software company. They were going to be huge in IoT and so forth. And I'm sure there still is elements of that. But, it'll be interesting to sort of watch as companies try and evolve into becoming software companies. So interesting to watch what's happening with GE. Next on our list, and big congratulations to our good friends at HashiCorp, who we've covered for a very long time, all the way back to when Mitchell was first just working on the Vagrant product and barely making ends meet, as he would say. He was making a little bit of money as a VMware license for Vagrant, and he had this open source project, and they announced that they are releasing their S1, all of their sort of financial information ahead of a planned IPO. So congratulations to them. I think looking through the S1, it looks very promising. We're actually going to cover looking at that in one of our Sunday Perspectives coming up, because they're a company that's been really interesting to see how they've evolved, especially in the open source space and more so into new cloud services space. So congratulations to that team. Our friends at Datadog, longtime friends of the show, longtime sponsors of the show, acquired Ozcode, going to help them be better, expanding out the observability space, really bringing live debugging to things. So the observability space continues to grow, more and more areas in which the technology becomes relevant, those foundations of monitoring and synthetic replication of what's going on and so forth, monitoring databases, looking at observability, all those things are going on. So congratulations to the Datadog team. Their stock has been growing like crazy lately, so doing very, very well as a business. And the last two things we wanted to announce, or not announce, but sort of talk about just briefly was, we always do our announcements of sort of the big cloud providers, AWS, Azure, and Google. We did that last week. They do their quarterly numbers. And then Cloudflare and DigitalOcean also announced their numbers. And we thought, as we're seeing, and we've talked about, sort of different smaller aspects of the business beginning to sort of chip away at some things, the big three maybe not covered nearly as much. In the case of DigitalOcean, some of the small, medium business types of services. And in the case of Cloudflare, there are two offering that may potentially be very, very interesting in competing with S3 and disrupting some of the data side of things. Cloudflare announced their numbers. They were up 51%. DigitalOcean announced their numbers up 37%. So we're going to kind of add them to the list of companies that we want to keep track of in terms of announcements, in terms of clouds and how they're doing, and kind of who's growing fast and who may be slowing down. So with that, I'm going to wrap up Cloud News of the Week. We have a really interesting interview. We talked a little bit a couple weeks ago about, kind of interconnecting multiple clouds, but, this time we're really going to dive into it with new guest, Megaport, who we're really excited about because they really bring a lot of experience around, how do we get from the edge of wherever your workers are, wherever your data is, wherever your applications and workloads are, and bring those into the cloud and really dive into what are the technologies and the evolution of how that virtual edge, especially with COVID moving us all around, has been evolving. So we're going to get to that right after the break. Today's show is brought to you by CBT Nuggets. You know how much we value ongoing education on the Cloudcast. And CBT Nuggets is exactly what Aaron and I wish we had when we were trying to get our certification early in our careers. CBT Nuggets is all about bringing a personalized touch to learning about cloud computing, virtualization, networking, DevOps, and much, much more. Whether it's their hands-on labs with personalized coaching or the online chat functions that come up with every instructor-led course, CBT Nuggets' team of experts is always there to help you get the most from your training and your path to certification. You can check it all out at cbtnuggets.com/cloudcast and sign up for a free trial. You get access to the full catalog of great training, including virtual labs, quizzes, and other premium features completely free for the first 7 days. That's cbtnuggets.com/cloudcast. Today's show is sponsored by Datadog, a scalable, full-stack monitoring platform. Datadog's synthetic API tests help you detect and debug user-facing issues in critical endpoints and applications. Build and deploy self-maintaining browser tests to simulate user journeys from global locations. If a test fails, get more context by inspecting a waterfall visualization or pivoting to related sources of data for troubleshooting. Plus, Datadog's AI-powered browser tests automatically update to reflect changes in your UI, so you can spend less time fixing tests and more time building features. Proactively monitor user experience today with a free 14-day trial of Datadog. Visit datadog.com/frontend-cloudcast. That's datadog.com/frontend-cloudcast. And we're back. And folks, if you listen to last week's show, we dug a little bit into some of the networking that goes on in what we called hybrid clouds, that we were really kind of focused on certain ways of thinking about things from an application perspective. And one of the things that we get a lot of questions about from people is as they're thinking about their environments that involve on-prem data centers, the public cloud, maybe potentially even connecting to SaaS services, sort of the normal mix that we see with a lot of companies is, what happens in between, right? How do we not only interconnect with all those environments, how do we keep them secure? If we're beginning to go over the internet, how do we do that in a way that's efficient and takes advantage of these new technologies that go on because, people are working from everywhere, our applications are everywhere, our users are everywhere. And so we thought, it would be really good to dig into, how does that work? How does the things in the middle of all of these things that we work on day to day, how does that work? And so very, very excited to have Mike Rockwell, who is Global Head of Solutions at Megaport, one of the largest interconnect providers in the world, join us today. Mike, welcome to the show. Great to have you on.
Hey, Brian, great to be here. Thanks for the intro.
So, I'm excited today because, I've told folks many times in this show, my career started way back in the day of doing networking. So networking and anything around the network is always near and dear to my heart, but it's changed so much since I was doing CCIE stuff, many moons ago. Before we dive into kind of all the things that Megaport works on, give me a little bit of your background and how you've kind of come to be focused in this space.
Yeah, well, speaking about many moons ago, when I start thinking about my background, it's kind of crazy to think that I've been a sales engineer or a solution architect for the past 22 or 23 years.
Wow.
Really grew up on the carrier side of the business. So I worked for a company called NextLink that turned into Exo Communications that's now Verizon's.
Okay.
Primarily selling DS1s, DS3s, frame relays for private networks and OC48 and OC192 rings to the wireless providers. So, man, you think back to the late 90s, early 2000s, and kind of building into the middle 2000s and the way that we built out networks and how the enterprises built out their networks. It's just really crazy to think about how far it's come. I moved on from NextLink or Exo Communications and went to a company called Zayo Group based out of Boulder, Colorado. And their primary focus was not just on building out different network connectivity models. They still supported SONET at the time, barely, but moving more towards high bandwidth wavelength connectivity. But primarily, Zayo was in the business of consolidating dark fiber assets across the globe and did a great job of doing it. And where that kind of built on my experience and actually brought me a little bit closer to some of the points that we're talking today and working with the hyperscalers is building out dark fiber networks. So I got the opportunity to work with a lot of the larger hyperscalers and building out their networks that ultimately connected their regions across the globe. Also had the opportunity to kind of move into a leadership role with Zayo as well. So I was a director of sales engineering there for a few years. But for the last 4 years, I've been here at Megaport. Started as a solution architect, moved into leading our North American sales team, and then now I'm managing our global solution architect team. So really what drew me to Megaport was just that they totally were transforming the way that network connectivity really was done. They brought it into a more modern automated type of way of deploying connectivity from the data center to the cloud. Anyone who's worked in a carrier environment knows that just to turn up one location, it could take 30 to 45 days to turn up a private connection. With Megaport, when I got the opportunity to see what they were doing, to see that they could actually do that in a matter of minutes, it really transformed the way that I thought about how we can set up network connectivity, and then also said, hey, I kind of want to be a part of that. Yeah. So that really brings us to where we are today.
No, that's cool. That's for those of you that didn't necessarily live through some of those days. I mean, it's the concept of my business is in multiple locations. It used to be you had to be a supply chain expert because you had to manage getting equipment out there. You were managing how to fly people out to locations and set up equipment for them. All sorts of weird things you had to understand about, all those stuff that you were talking about, DS1s and DS3s and, basically high-speed interconnections to the internet, except we weren't talking about the internet back then. It was, companies had private environments. They then overlaid security on top of those private environments. In most cases, every piece of equipment was owned by them and they were all the same. And now we live in this world where, the workforce is all over the place, even pre-COVID, but now post-COVID, the workforce is all over the place. Where our applications aren't in one data center, right? They're in Cloud A and Cloud B and SaaS Service C and other things. Give me a sense, from a business perspective, from a, how do you help those businesses? Where does Megaport fit in the middle of that picture, right? If I'm a large corporation and I go, hey, I have all this stuff all over the place now. Maybe my IT staff doesn't have a WAN team anymore like they used to, or an interconnect team. Like, where's the business value, kind of right off the bat that Megaport brings to that company who goes, I just need the connectivity, but somebody else can help me make it easier.
Right. That's a great question. I think going back and just looking at the way that we did things 10 years ago, it would never work in today's environment, right? People want to build out their network connectivity in the same way that they're able to support, building out their applications or running their business in the cloud. And that's on demand. They want to have flexibility. They want to have scale, right? So Megaport really was built, on the business model of saying, how do I get to the cloud provider edge? So anyone who's built a private connection to the cloud knows that the edge of the cloud provider network doesn't sit in every data center across the globe, right? You ultimately have to get to the cloud provider edge to build private connectivity into the cloud. Mm-hmm. And that's really where Megaport, was founded. Our founder owned a group of data centers. His customers would come to him and say, I'm sitting in your data center. This was probably 7-8 years ago when Megaport was founded, right when cloud connectivity really was starting to take off, or cloud adoption was really starting to take off. And his customers would come to him and ask him, I need to get to AWS, but the edge of the AWS network's not in your data center.
Right.
You start to look to the options of how that happens. Well, I have to go back to that traditional carrier model and build out a private point-to-point layer 1 or layer 2 type of connection. And as our founder had the vision of seeing that that's just not the way that customers are going to be able to, more rapidly adopt cloud, and also to support their growing business needs over the, coming years. This is really where Megaport was born. And, what he did was, one, he built out an infrastructure that connected third-party data centers and the edge of the cloud. So we built out the layer 1 infrastructure. Then he built a layer 2 network over the top. So deployed physical equipment in the data center, deployed physical equipment in the edge data center where the cloud provider lived. then deployed a software-defined networking structure over the top that allowed the customers to build private connectivity on demand. Also integrating that software-defined network infrastructure into the cloud providers. So if a customer now wants to, say, connect through Megaport, they're able to physically connect in a data center at a 110 or even potentially 100 gig connection. They'll set up an 802.1q trunk, and then they're able to build logical connections or private layer 2 pseudo-wire Ethernet connections to the cloud provider edge. In that process, we've also built out API integration on our platform to where the customer can also, in an on-demand fashion, turn up the connectivity with the cloud provider as well. So really the first business challenge that Megaport provided in setting up private connectivity was the data center or hybrid cloud connectivity model. Mm-hmm. And now a customer can come onto our platform. They can select from 700 enabled data center sites. They can go into a Megaport portal, deploy a 1 or a 10 gig or 100 gig connection. Once they're physically connected to our network, they can literally turn up connections on demand to the hyperscalers that they want to reach in a one-to-many type of approach.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think, again, we're doing a little bit of sort of back and forth between history lessons and today. I think the thing that people need to understand sometimes is, back in the day, and again, this could be just 4 or 5 years ago, the places where interconnects were tended to be, the term that's often used is like NFL cities, right? Like maybe the biggest 20 or 30 cities in a given country, at least in the United States, and that applies somewhat in other places as well. But the other thing that people don't realize is, if you were in the main building of your company, whether that was, a big company or a little company, you had tons of bandwidth because, you built around the idea that the proximity of your applications was fairly local. But then when you got to the WAN, the wide area network, connecting to other sites, or even going to the internet, that connectivity might be 1/10, 1/100th of the bandwidth that you had locally. Right. So you had these gigantic bottlenecks that would happen. And so, you think about, you fast forward to today, your applications are all over the place, right? We no longer are, always have them local. And where people start businesses is all over the place. So, if you were in Omaha, Nebraska, or you're in Raleigh, North Carolina, or you're in Austin, or you're in, anywhere that wasn't the biggest city, you now have the ability to compete and be as prominent on the internet as anybody else, and that's a huge change in kind of the business model that's available to them.
Yeah, no, definitely. While the cloud providers continue to build out additional regions, those regions aren't everywhere, and those edge locations aren't everywhere.
Right.
As you look at some of those kind of, I don't know, not the NFL cities, but I don't know if you want to call them tier 2, tier 3 type of markets, right, where the regions don't sit, the edge of the cloud provider network doesn't sit. Being able to connect in one of those regions, build private connectivity to the cloud provider edge, that's really a service that many of our customers are looking for.
Yeah. Can you walk us through, if you're a business, we come to Megaport, for example, what are some of the options that we've got available to them? Is it as basic as like, on demand or sort of like dedicated bandwidth and certain speeds? Is there on demand options? What other sort of options do you present to me that, sort of align to some of my business needs?
Yeah. So when you look at the connectivity piece of it, kind of in the traditional Megaport model of connecting in the data center, you've got that physical connection, so a router to router switch type of connection between Megaport and the customer network. When we talk about building what we term as VXCs or virtual cross connects, which are going to be the logical connections off of that interface and the layer 2 connections between the data center and the cloud, really customers. One of the things that is kind of interesting is customers definitely don't always know the bandwidth requirements that they're going to have in building out that connectivity. So again, back to kind of that traditional, network architecture where you build a point to point, you're pretty much stuck, or at least it's going to take you a while to change that bandwidth. In a network as a service and a software-defined networking type of platform, and customers have the flexibility to literally change that bandwidth on demand. So on a Megaport network, they literally could scale from 1 meg all the way up to 10 gigs. So if you're starting out with a 1 gig connection today, you run it for a while and realize that you need additional bandwidth, or maybe even you want to restrict that a little bit further. A customer can go into their management console. They can make those changes as they see fit. They can also integrate it and automate it from an API perspective. So, really everything that has turned into as a service. I think even ordering food now seems to be like as a service. But everything has turned into that as a service model. It has to be in a consumable form to where I can make those changes when I want to make them and how I want to make them, and I don't want to wait. Right, and that's really the platform that we built.
Yeah, no, and I can imagine, even just over the last 18 months, like that's got to be incredibly important. Or, people that I talk to, companies I talk to, I mean, the amount of change they've had to go through in terms of where people work, the way that the new way that we interact with markets and so forth changes so much that, I may need a bunch of bandwidth for 2 months because I'm running promotions, or, hey, we rolled out this new product and oh my gosh, it's growing way faster than we expected to. And I can't go back and rethink the hardware that we bought. Like being able to sort of turn the knob up and down is really important. And as we mentioned on a Cloud News of the Week, I think about a week or so ago, we're now seeing 80% of job openings for things like application developers be, remote friendly. So, that's going to keep changing the way that people need flexibility. Companies need flexibility about, not only where people work and where applications live, but, how do you interconnect those things? So yeah, cool that you guys can just kind of turn it up and down, make it API driven. I mean, again, it completely aligns to what you do in the cloud. I want to dive a little bit into some of the ways that this happens in real life. You guys, you have an offering called MVE or Megaport Virtual Edge. It combines these two things that I see a lot about, and I don't necessarily know a ton about. One's called SD-WAN, and then one is called SASE or SASE. Tell me a little bit about how all those things come together. What do they do, and how do those things come together?
Yeah, no, I mean, we're fired up about the Megaport Virtual Edge. We launched it earlier this year, officially with Cisco. But when you look at Megaport Virtual Edge, essentially what it gives our customers the ability to do now is host instances on Megaport supplied compute across the globe. So starting off the bat, we're working with some of the top SD-WAN providers, and customers can now go and get a license from one of those providers. They can take that license, they can host it on Megaport supplied compute, and essentially turn up a virtual edge or a virtual router integrated into their SD-WAN platform. Now, why that's important is you talked a little bit about applications and users being more dispersed than ever. And we talk about the global infrastructure that Megaport has built as an as-a-service type of platform. Well, now with MVE and being able to integrate that into an SD-WAN type of environment, customers can essentially deploy virtual POPs across the globe. They're able to aggregate over a short hop on the internet, a branch to the MVE. And now they're able to take advantage of that global Megaport network as a service platform and build private connectivity off of that virtual routing hub or virtual routing POP directly to the cloud providers. So if they want to have private connectivity to access SaaS, say in Salesforce, they can do that directly off of MVE. They can use the Edge Express Connect Salesforce service or private connectivity service through Megaport. They can access AWS and Azure right at the edge of the cloud provider network using private connectivity, and also then build global network infrastructure to tie in their data centers and other MVEs that are supported in other regions, and essentially build out a private backbone in an as-a-service type of manner. So the way that we really position our service in MVE is the ability to build out the underlying infrastructure in a modernized form to support a customer's SD-WAN overlay. So really, and we'll probably talk about it a little bit here down the line, but a suitable replacement for certain segments of MPLS, to where most customers that want to stick with traditional MPLS type of architecture, like the security and the performance that they get from MPLS, the predictability, with a modernized SD-WAN type of infrastructure solution, or middle mile as a lot of people would call it, they're kind of able to take the best of both worlds. They get the short hop on the internet, so typically one hop. Then they're building the longer path across private connectivity over a SLA backbone, to where they're seeing very similar performance that they would see from their MPLS network. Yeah. And then it also gives them the flexibility to turn up these virtual POPs, where their users sit, right? So they can get onto the network quicker, bringing the edge closer to the users and their locations, but then also integrating those apps or those applications into those hubs as well.
Yeah, no, it's really interesting. We used to have this sort of concept, depending on where you physically were located, created this concept within businesses, within organizations that was sort of like, if you were in a certain place, you were sort of a first class citizen of the company, and if you were in a remote location or even a further remote location, you were a second or third class citizen because your bandwidth was just so restrictive, and that would be like a long-term commitment. It'd be like, well, yeah, you're working from home, and we're giving you equipment that's going to last for 3 years, and you're getting 1/10 the bandwidth that you'd have if you lived in the next big city. It's pretty cool that you guys are able to basically be like, we're going to make everybody sort of first-class citizens of what they want to get to. The internet, for as big as it is all one hop away. And then what's really interesting to me is some of these SD-WAN technologies, allow you to get to not just an Amazon or an Azure or Google, but services like Salesforce or Office 365 or these SaaS services in a way that, again, makes it seem like you're, as close to them as possible. So that's really, really cool evolution to see how that's evolved. You talked about MPLS. I don't want to go into too much detail because we can get really wonky about what all that means and the networking of it. But like, give me a sense. Like MPLS is a kind of an older networking technology for those folks that aren't real familiar with it. It basically was a way that you could go over wide area networks or across the internet. It sort of isolated your traffic. It allowed it to have SLAs and guaranteed bandwidth, but it was. It wasn't the most dynamic thing, but it was really good for if you knew what you wanted. SD-WAN is a little more flexible. Kind of give us a sense technology-wise, what does SD-WAN do for anybody who sees that, or they're having to design an application that lives out on the internet somewhere?
Okay, yeah, I think when we look at MPLS and the customers that we're working with, it's typically a centralized architecture, right? Yeah. So if I'm at the branch, I'm riding over this private network. So I have a private connection out to the branch, one that's somewhat expensive. I have a private connection from my backhaul, typically to a data center. Mm-hmm. Within that data center, I have a stack, a network stack. I have a security stack. So from the branch to access the internet, typically that had to go back through the data center. To the branch to access, SaaS or IaaS environments in the cloud, went back through the data center. Well, obviously, as users and applications became more distributed, that type of model just really wasn't conducive. If I wanted to turn up another connection, let's just say I wanted to turn up a connection to one of the cloud providers off my MPLS network. Well, for one, it's going to be pretty expensive. It's going to probably take me 30, 60 days just to get it integrated into my MPLS network. And that's just to one cloud provider to potentially access just, a handful of applications, right?
Right.
When we look at moving into SD-WAN, one of the biggest benefits of that is now I don't have to rely fully on private network connectivity on the branch. I can use a DIA or an internet connection out of my branch office. I can route over the internet to either another SD-WAN endpoint that I deploy in the cloud, or in the sense of where Megaport really kind of brings it all together is I can use that short hop. So I can use the internet access, and I can save some of the cost potentially on my MPLS network of having private connectivity out to each one of my branch sites. Use that short hop across the internet. I can deploy an SD-WAN edge, virtual edge on the Megaport platform. I can then build that private connectivity into the cloud providers. I have full access over the routing of my traffic at the edge where it's connected to the cloud on my SD-WAN network, mm-hmm. to where I can route my applications specifically in the direction that they want to go, right? So if I'm out at the branch and I say I want this application to route over a short hop to the internet to Megaport to, say, Salesforce or to AWS, I can control that traffic and I can send that application specifically over a specific path. Maybe there's still instances, whether it's some type of security or some type of government regulation, where I need to have private connectivity just in basic locations or in just certain locations on my WAN. Mm-hmm. In that particular case, great. Then I can still direct that particular traffic over private network connectivity and keep that private network in place where I need it. But then I can, save costs, save bandwidth, and being able to direct it over a Megaport solution directly to, one of the cloud providers and turn up those hubs in locations where I need them across the globe, in an on-demand type of fashion.
Yeah. Well, and the reason I kind of asked that question is, we get our audience tends to be a mix, right? There's a part of it that's infrastructure and operations and security centric, and then there's a mix of it that's application centric. And sometimes when we sort of cross those streams, we know that people sort of, they go, it's not related to me, it drops out. And I kind of wanted to dig into it because, if I'm building an application, especially nowadays, applications tend to not just be kind of a monolithic, 3-tier type of thing. It's this distribution of different pieces coming together. Sometimes it's distributed, sometimes it's made up of, stuff that you wrote, and sometimes it's a SaaS application. And so I think it's important for, application teams to also understand like, oh, okay, there's ways that you don't have to build everything into your application. If you're like, hey, this is, it'd be great if we could, reduce latency for this. It's going to give a better user experience. Or, hey, the requirements are to, tap into something in Salesforce, but also pull this feed from wherever. But boy, that seems hard because they're not things that we can control. Like understanding that some of these technologies exist, diving into them a little bit, and then maybe being able to ask your infrastructure team, your cloud provider, to go, hey, can you guys help me with this? Help me with this security offload or this latency problem or whatever. It's good to just sort of have a little broader context, I think. And I appreciate you kind of giving a scope of what that looks like. I want to wrap up a little bit. Let's kind of pull all this together. Give me a business case. Kind of walk me through maybe some of the types of things that you hear from your customers in terms of like, why do I need some of these more advanced technologies, right? Like the need for on-demand bandwidth, being able to scale that up and down, being able to make that faster. That all totally makes sense because we always want faster and better responses. But like, walk me through a little bit of like, people start talking about SD-WAN, software-defined WAN, or SASE, and like, what is that? Why would I need that? Where's the intersection between like the cool things the technology does and the types of business problems where that makes sense?
Yeah, I think that's interesting. And you bring up SASE, or I guess Secure Access Service Edge, right? I think we brought that up a little bit earlier, but didn't touch on that. Really in my mind, I mean, I think SASE means different things to different folks, but to me, the definition of SASE is bringing the network as a service and security as a service together, right? To where I have network and security in an as a service manner, and I'm hopefully managing that under one service provider as well. So if you look at the SD-WAN providers that we're working with, so we're working with Cisco, we're working with Fortinet, we have Versa on the platform, and we have Silver Peak Aruba coming up here soon, and we'll also have VMware coming on the platform here soon. All these SD-WAN providers are trying to build that full as a service stack, right? And a SASE type of solution is the way that they're marketing it. So, what we see from our customers in terms of MVE, and where MVE and the Megaport Virtual Edge can, help support a SASE type of deployment, is that I want to build a SASE POP at a location that's close to my users, and I want to be able to build that infrastructure to the endpoints that they want to reach, right? So, with Megaport and MVE, customers through the SD-WAN providers that we're working with can build, these SASE virtual POPs essentially anywhere they want to across the globe, where they can both, one, integrate that network as a service platform, and also build that security as a service platform. So customers, like I think you mentioned it earlier, in moving to that platform, they don't want to manage a whole security stack at the branch, right?
Right.
I don't want to manage a router and a switch at the router at the branch, or switch at the branch, whatever, and then also have another firewall sitting out at that branch. I want to have one piece essentially, or one provider that I can manage that full network and security stack with. For one, it helps me from a security perspective because I don't have to have the knowledge across my department to be maybe whoever the firewall vendor is. I don't need to be an expert with that vendor. I don't need to have another expert that's an expert within Cisco. I can bring all that in under one platform and manage it, through one provider, and simplifying that approach. So a lot of our customers that we are working with, they're potentially looking to become, less branch heavy and having a whole stack, and then, more cloud heavy and an SD-WAN, network as a service, and security as a service kind of combined platform. So, really across all these providers, that's where we see a lot of our customers going. And that's, where Megaport platform can, help them to deploy these solutions.
Yeah. Well, and I think it makes sense. It's, every trend that we see, every earnings report we see, we're seeing, more and more usage of the cloud, more and more distribution of where applications are, distribution of our workforce, distribution of, where our customers are to the applications we use. So it makes more and more sense to say, look, I don't necessarily need to keep investing expertise in, our own homegrown way of, getting to the internet, connecting, making sure it's secure. Like I want to continue to focus on, businesses spending their money on creating differentiation for the business, building more interesting applications, and being able to say, look, I can come to somebody like Megaport. They've got expertise. They've got already, existing connectivity between literally hundreds of locations, all the cloud providers I need. I can say, look, those days of having to have that in-house expertise no longer differentiate the business the way maybe it used to a decade, 2 decades ago, when it was important to say, hey, like we have branch offices near our users. It makes a ton of sense. And the fact that it's evolved so much to a point where, as we said in the beginning, it's API driven, it's on demand. I can connect anywhere I want to. That's a huge evolution, and good to see that all those things are happening. You get a chance to talk to a lot of companies. What's the best way if folks are like, man, this stuff sounds like some of the problems that we have. I want to dig into this some more. Like, what are the best ways for folks to engage with your team, with Megaport, with, kind of seeing how this all would work for them?
Yeah, well, they can certainly reach out to me if they want.
Yeah.
Mike.Rockwell@megaport.com. I think another way that is easy for customers to engage with us is through our website at megaport.com. You can certainly inquire there, and we can set up a consultation. But I think one of the things that is unique to our crew or our business is that we are very linear focused in what we support, right? So we support data center cloud connectivity in the form of our ports and VXCs. We have our Megaport Cloud Router that's great for multi-cloud connectivity that sits on our private platform. And now we're also able to consult on, bringing all of your endpoints together across your WAN through an SD-WAN type of deployment and building that infrastructure through Megaport. So, we have a wide ranging, we have a wide range now that we can attack in the WAN. So we love to get together and, really build out that infrastructure, white out that infrastructure with you, understand all the endpoints that customers want to connect to, and try and build ultimately the best solution for them to support their users and applications in the best form that we can.
Yeah. No, it's good stuff. And we keep seeing this evolution towards, more distributed clouds, more distributed applications and use cases, and being able to know that somebody can just sort of take care of that for you is awesome. So, Mike, I want to thank you so much. Like I said in the beginning, we've been hearing a lot about some of these technologies. We've been curious about what happens in between all these clouds that we talk about all the time, and this has been great to really kind of dig into both sort of the business side and the technology side. So I want to thank you so much for your time, folks. With that, I'm going to kind of wrap up for today. I want to thank Mike on behalf of Aaron and I. I want to thank all of you for listening each week and telling a friend about the show, helping us grow the community. This last month was the largest month we've had in terms of listens and downloads in I think about 3 years. So thank you all for continuing to support the show, to tell a friend, and give us feedback in all the places you listen on your podcast. So with that, I'm going to wrap it up, and we'll talk to you next week.
Thank you for listening to The Cloudcast. Please visit thecloudcast.net to find more shows, show notes, videos, and everything social media.